Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you've had a very Merry Christmas. My name is Dr. Maddie and I'm one of your doctors from the UK. Today, in anticipation of the release of the new Attack on Titan season airing early next year, we're going to be taking a look back at some of the fights from the previous seasons. We'll be looking at fight injuries such as tendon ruptures, eye perforations and burns from atomic radiation. So stick around to the end of this video to catch all of those. And don't forget, if you like videos like this, I have plenty more on my channel covering anime such as Baki, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and many more. Now you can help out the channel by liking this video and commenting down below what was your favourite fight from the Attack on Titan series. Without any further delay, let's begin. Gosh, okay, so to start off with, we've got a direct punch to the face and enough to send him flying through the air. Now, as a minimum, we'd be looking at facial fractures and particularly the mandible, or otherwise known as the jawbone. Now, one of the reasons why I love Attack on Titan is that all of the underlying anatomy, including the bones and muscles, are already exposed. So for a video like this, it makes my job relatively easy. Now, of course, in the anime, Erin has a healing factor, but in real life, a fracture like this may well need surgical repair, which would involve placing plates and screws across the fracture line to keep the jaw in place. Nice! And there's a chokehold and a takedown there. And it looks like the artists really knew what they were doing when they were trying to design this fight scene. I mean, it looks like it's something pulled out of an MMA fight. But effectively, with a chokehold like this, you're effectively cutting off the air supply and the blood supply to the brain. Now, this would lead to a blackout and a KO. However, I don't think the Armoured Titan has the option to tap out here. Now, in reality, with a takedown like this, I would expect you to get winded. And the reason you get winded is that the diaphragm muscle, which is involved in breathing, can go into spasm. Now, as a result, this can throw off your breathing. The best way to recover from it is by taking a few simple, relaxing breaths. Nice, and some more MMA moves here, and it looks like he's trying to lock in both his forearm and his shoulder. Now, with a hyperextension injury like this, you can cause both a fracture and a dislocation of the elbow. And we've got to remember that the elbow joint is what we would call a hinge joint, as opposed to the shoulder joint, which we would call a ball and socket joint. Now, the advantages of a ball and socket joint is that it has a greater range of movement, whereas a hinge joint can only really move like a hinge of a door, both open and closed. Now, if you sustain a fracture to the elbow, these are normally quite obvious because the limb tends to go completely limp. Typically, patients would need surgery to help repair this, again with possibly some plates and screws, as well as a cast to keep things immobilized whilst it heals. Gosh, and I didn't see this bit earlier, but we see blood fly out of the Armoured Titan's shoulder, which might suggest that he has what we would call a rotator cuff tear. Now, the rotator cuff is a group of both large and small muscles that help to encapsulate the shoulder, giving it support and allowing it to have a dynamic range of movement. Now, it's surprisingly easy to damage any one of these muscles that help to support the shoulder. In fact, I see it very commonly in my practice. And the problem with these injuries is that it often takes many months, if not longer, to recover, with patients often requiring pretty intense physiotherapy and pain relief before getting back to their pre-injured state. And not to forget, in the second part of that scene, we see the Armoured Titan face plant the ground. Now, as a minimum, you might expect something like a nasal fracture or fractures with the facial bones and teeth. And depending on the area that armour covers, he may well have a concussion as well. Oh god, and he completely rips his arm off there. Now, I can't say I've seen anyone who's sustained this type of injury, but I've definitely seen people develop fractures through this mechanism. Often the bone protrudes through the skin, and if that's the case, we call this an open fracture as opposed to a closed fracture where the bone stays within the skin. Now, ways of managing fractures like this is that you need to manually manipulate the bones to help restore their natural alignment, and then depending on the severity, they may well be able to get away with just wearing a cast alone, or they may need to go for surgery to help pin all this back together. Okay, so in this scene we see a shoulder block takedown or a spear, and the danger with this type of injury is normally the amount of force that's applied to either the chest or the abdomen. Now, hitting the chest straight on like this, you might expect to see things like a fracture to either the breastbone or the surrounding ribs, whereas if you hit a little lower down in the abdomen, you would expect as a minimum that they would be winded, and you can actually cause some damage to the underlying organs such as the liver, causing internal bleeding. Nice, and in this scene we see how far Erin's come with his hand-to-hand combat. Now, I have to be honest here and say that I have been caught in a position like this when fighting with my siblings, and I almost blacked out. Now, I'm no martial artist, but I have to say, when those legs are wrapped around you, it definitely taxes your energy levels and your ability to throw off your opponent. Now, what an awesome piece of fight choreography. I have to say that Mikasa is one of the most badass characters in this series. But looking at the injury, at the back of the knee is where you get multiple muscles inserting into the bone through their tendons. Now, if the tendons were severed, it would render the limb beyond the knee useless and take away the ability from the Armoured Titan to get out of this position. However, in real life, if you had a torn tendon like this, it would need surgical repair with it being stitched back to its insertion point. Oh, okay, and next up we have Levi versus the Beast Titan, and Levi straight up tears through the muscles in the Beast Titan's forearm. Now, this type of injury would sever all of the muscles and tendons in the forearm, which would effectively render the Beast Titan armless and unable to defend themselves. But it's interesting seeing inside the Titans like this. I don't know why I'm just seeing this now, but it kind of reminds me of how the pilots pilot the Gundams in the Gundam anime. What do you think? Oh god, and what an absolute savage. He goes straight for the eyes, perforating both eyeballs. And in real life, I don't really know if this is something you can recover from. I mean, you'd be surprised with the types of things people end up sticking inside their body and they recover from. I had a patient just the other day who stabbed himself in the eye with a screwdriver. Now, fortunately, they were able to get down to the accident and emergency team. They were sent through to the ophthalmologist who were able to stitch up the eye, and they made a full recovery. Amazing, isn't it? This scene really helps to demonstrate how intelligent Levi is as a fighter. I mean, firstly, he's disarmed the Beast Titan, he's then disorientated him by making him blind, and then just lastly here, he's severed his Achilles tendons, making him unable to run away. Now, just to talk a little about the Achilles tendons, so what they do, they help to anchor your gastrocnemius or calf muscles into your feet. Now, these muscles are essential in both walking and running, and if these tendons are severed, these muscles are taken completely out of the game. Now, a simple test we do in the A&E department to determine if the Achilles tendon has been severed is what we call a calf squeeze test. Now, if you squeeze the calf and the foot moves, we know that the Achilles tendon is intact. If you squeeze the calf and the foot doesn't move, you need to be worried that they've severed their Achilles tendon. This will require a longer recovery and potential surgical repair. God, and the Beast Titan has been completely defeated here by Levi, and with the way he's got the blade in the mouth like that, you'd think he was getting a dental checkup. Oh, and here we see Armin sacrificing himself, getting exposed to the Colossal Titan, who's putting out massive amounts of energy and effectively frying Armin to a crisp. Now, I've heard that when the Colossal Titan transforms, he puts out an equivalent energy to that of an atomic bomb. So I'm going to assume that Armin's injuries are thermal burns secondary to the exposure to atomic radiation. Now, the danger with these full thickness burns that Armin sustains is that sometimes the skin can become so tight that it actually strangulates the underlying structures, such as the blood vessels. Now, in this situation, the skin has to be intentionally cut open to help relieve the pressure on the underlying tissues in a procedure that we call an escharotomy. Now, unfortunately, with this extent of burns, I wouldn't expect Armin to make it. Okay, and in this fight scene we see Erin come up against a WarHammer Titan. And we start off with a pretty cool scene where we see the WarHammer Titan's skeleton get layered up with muscles, teeth and eyes. Now, I can imagine some of you budding medical students at home using this scene to help justify watching anime to help revise for your exams. But in all seriousness, the anatomy depicted in the Attack on Titan series is pretty accurate. But looking at the injury sustained to the WarHammer Titan in this scene, we see that Erin continuously punches them in the face, and we see that one of the eyeballs actually pops out. Now, if this was in real life, you would suspect an orbital blowout fracture, where the floor of the orbit fractures like a trapdoor, and as a result the eye sinks into this fracture point, and clinically eyeballing them, you'd see that their eyes were offset. Obviously, this would need surgery to repair. Okay, God. Well, that's definitely an impalement injury with this spike going straight through his abdomen, which would clearly cause massive internal hemorrhage and death. Now, there's always the temptation to remove the object that you've been stabbed with, but I would urge you not to, as there's a chance that with removing the object this could cause further bleeding and potential death. So if something like this happens to you, leave it where it is and get yourself to accident and emergency. Oh God, a hammer to both his hands and his head. I'm sorry, Erin, there's no way of escaping this. You're dead.
Sasha!
And in today's final scene here, we see that Sasha gets shot. Now, the location she was shot in, you'd be worried about a perforation to the stomach and a possible ruptured spleen. Now, the possible consequence of this is that it can lead to massive internal hemorrhage, and if the bleeding isn't stemmed, she could go into hypovolemic shock from blood loss and die. Rest in peace, Sasha. Okay, that's the end of today's video. I hope you found today's video educational and fun. Let me know down below what you've learnt from today's breakdown. As always, please give any recommendations for other animes down below in the comments. My next few videos will be covering shows such as Hajime no Ippo, Hunter x Hunter, and Mob Psycho 100. So I'll be seeing you very soon. Have a happy new year, everyone. Thanks.